Boldwood presents Pilgrim's War, written by Michael Jecks and read by David Thorpe. Book 1. The Gathering Storm. Chapter 1. Sens, Monday the 24th of March, 1096. The news rippled through the market like flames running along a cloth. People left the stalls of food and wine and made their way to the square. Many looked up at the church, struck with the steeple symbolically pointing towards heaven as they waited. This was a great day, a day no one would forget. They had waited 6 months for this. Sybill disliked large crowds. She slapped the hand at her backside, glaring at the grinning, bearded man. Joss shoved the man away with his staff. "Thank you, Joss," she said, shielding Richalda as best she could from the other men near them. Joss nodded. Only a little taller than her, with the fair hair of a Norseman and pale grey eyes, his face lined like a peasant's. Her husband, Bonnet, had found him unemployed at the docks, and Joss was as loyal as a man rescued from poverty could be. He whipped out with his staff, and another man cursed and took his injured hand away. It was the way of things. In a throng like this, women and young girls like Richalda were considered fair game. It was dangerous for them in a crowd like this. Not only men groping them, squeezing and pinching as if testing fruit. Worse could happen. The lower classes reckoned any woman was available if she joined a crowd. But today should have been different. They had come to hear the preacher. He arrived yesterday, a ragged, hunched figure in filthy clothes with a face like his donkey's. He only ever drank wine and ate fish, apparently, and, after his extensive travels, he was as emaciated as a scavenging cur. But his piety shone from his eyes, it was said, and Bonnet wanted to hear him speak. Dear Bonnet, 7 years older than her, but since their marriage he had aged. It was difficult to make money as an apothecary, and they had come close to having to sell their rooms and find smaller lodgings. Though they scraped a living, money was always tight. Partly, she knew, it was his nature. He would gamble with friends at the tavern on cockfights, dogs, or a game of chance. It was what men did. She could not stop him. In the past, Sybill had pawned or sold her jewels, but there were few left now. The next time Bonnet saw a guaranteed opportunity or a wager he thought would make them secure, she prayed he would be right, and that he could avoid playing dice. The crowd began to jostle, and Sybill felt a thrill to see the man who would explain the Pope's proposal. All wanted to get closer, to hear the words that came straight from God. She could see nothing over the sea of heads and hats. Where was Bonnet? She hoped he had not gone to the wine shop to drink with his friends again. There was a sudden clamour, and when she looked back towards the church, a small man stood on a crate, arms held up to the sky for silence. From this distance, it was hard to see clearly, and Sybill hoped he would speak distinctly. But, even as she had the thought, the crowd was stilled, as though all were simultaneously struck dumb. The small figure began to speak. That 2 men looked so dissimilar made many suspicious, especially since their mother, as many acknowledged, had been far too friendly for her own good when a maid. It ensured that the brothers were the source of much quiet mirth while children. Odo, the elder, was 3 inches taller than Fulk, and ascetic in appearance. He had mousy-coloured hair and green eyes like his father. By contrast, Fulk was wiry, with dark hair and pale grey eyes. While some said Odo's narrow face and long nose were reminiscent of the local priest, None could deny that Fulk's strong, square jaw was like his father's. Fulk had a fiery spirit and speedily took offence, whether to himself or his brother, although he was equally quick to forgive and apologise. As he grew older, his stormy temperament was tempered with a generosity and warmth, while Otto grew more serious, a youth whose interest was sparked more by piety than by the pleasures of the flesh that inspired Fulk. Fulk's engaging smile, quick wit and charm made him notorious to the fathers of young maids in their village long before the two travelled to Sens. Otto to work in the church's bakery, Fulk to learn his trade at a blacksmith's. While their village would usually want to retain such skilled workers, most approved of the brothers' departure. All agreed that Fulk was a wastrel and malcontent who would deprive a score of maidens of their virginity and end on a gallows. Their wives agreed that he was no better than his mother, whilst casting thoughtful glances at his powerful shoulders, his regular features and ready smile. "What's he saying?" Fulk demanded now. "I can't hear." Otto frowned. He burped quietly, tasting sour wine, staring fixedly at the preacher. "Aye, well, with the noise here, there's no surprise," Fulk said, uncorking the wineskin and taking a gulp. "Drinking again?" Otto said. Fulk passed him the skin and Otto drank deeply. Fulk grabbed it. "Oi, don't finish it all." "Saving you from yourself, little brother," Otto said loftily. Fulk took another swig and cast his eye over the crowd. At the fringe, he saw her. A tall, dark woman, young girl before her, a thin, wiry man standing close by. He was far enough away to persuade Fulk he was no husband. A servant, then. A woman like her, elegant as a queen, would be chaperoned wherever she went. "I wouldn't mind hearing what she has to say," Fulk grinned. "Eh?" Otto said, distracted. "Nothing." "Quiet, then." "All right, Otto, we aren't in church," Fulk said mildly. He turned his attention towards Peter the Hermit. He was an unprepossessing character even at this distance, a shabby man, thin, wretched and grubby. "That's the Hermit, then?" a man asked. Otto was straining to hear, but Fulk nodded. "Yes, that's the one. What's he saying, Otto? Can you hear him?" "He says the man beside him is Sir Walter de Boissy sans avoir, a knight who's keen to protect pilgrims. The hermit says pilgrims used to travel to Jerusalem, but the last time he tried, the heathens stopped him and mocked him." Fulk shrugged, but something in the speaker's tone made him frown and peer more closely. The volume of the hermit's voice was swelling. "They prevent Christians from visiting the site of Jesus' crucifixion, but that is not the worst. These heathens persecute the Christian souls who live there. They are forced to give up their belongings and wealth. Those in Jerusalem itself are barred from participating in religious ceremonies. They are bullied, enslaved, their women taken and compelled to consent to all manner of—" His voice dropped to a low growl. "Vicious and unnatural acts. Christians have their private parts cut off to make them unsightly in the eyes of God, or have their bowels ripped from their bodies while they are alive, so that the heathens can learn whether they have swallowed gold or jewels. All this in the Holy Land, where Christ was born!" This last was bellowed, fists upraised, as though demanding that God himself listen. Gradually, his taut figure relaxed. His arms fell, and he gazed about him with weary insistence. He raised hands, cupped as if begging for alms. "This is why, my children,
This is why, when the Emperor of the Eastern Empire, our friend in Constantinople, begged that we should help him fight the predatory fiends who encroach ever nearer to his city, our Holy Father the Pope was so affected. He heard our brothers in Christ and prayed and reflected. And God has answered. God has told him what to do. March on the holy city itself and wrest it back from the foul heathen hordes. Even as I speak, hosts gather and will make their way to the Holy Land to fight all who stand against us. We shall fight these heretics and kill all who refuse to submit to God's will. Men march under the banners of men like Sir Walter de Boissy sans avoir here. Are the men of Sens less bold than those of Paris, of Toulouse, of Bordeaux? Nay! You will march too, will you not?
A roar of agreement and approval came from 1,000 throats. Fulk looked about him. Many lifted fists and shouted approval, while merchants exchanged subtle glances. They would be unlikely to risk their own hides, he reckoned.
Your sins will be forgiven if you join this holy endeavour. If you come, you will be rewarded in heaven.
He's a persuasive orator, Fulk said cynically. He knows how to get attention. The hermit lifted his fist again.
Will you join me? Will you help our cause? This is God's will. God asks it. God demands it. God wills it.
His words were taken up as a chant, and Fulk heard it reverberating around the square.
Dieu le veut! Dieu le veut! God wills it! God wills it!
Very persuasive, Fulk said. The chanting was thrilling. He could not deny it. I feel sorry for the fellows they'll attack.
They are godless heathens, brother, Otto said sharply. They deserve punishment for their crimes against God. Someone should do something,
a man near Fulk said. He was a scruffy tranter or carter with a belly like a barrel who introduced himself as Giddy. His hosen was splattered and stained with the mud of 100 villages, his tunic faded from green to pale brown where the sun had sucked the colour. A face wrinkled like a prune, but a nose as round and purple as a plum. He looked like any contented villager. Fulk nodded encouragingly. You want to march to Jerusalem on this, what did he call it, Otto?
A great itter, a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, to demand the right to visit the holy city and take it back from the heathens, that Christians might live there safely once more,
Otto said. Giddy shook his head.
I'm too old for marching.
There was a sudden roar from the crowds. It sounded like the massed baying of hounds, Fulk thought.
Dieu le veut!
Otto added thoughtfully.
He said, those who march will receive remission of all sins.
With your lifestyle, I'm surprised it doesn't appeal to you, Fulk.
Me?
Fulk said innocently. But Otto wasn't listening. The hermit concluded,
No matter your age, no matter your crime, your Pope, your Holy Father has promised you forgiveness. Those who die on this blessed pilgrimage will ascend to heaven immediately. Dieu le veut. God wills it. Give money to support the pilgrims or join us. What do you have to lose compared with all you gain? Aye,
Giddy said. He spat eloquently into the street.
Reckon there'll be enough willing to go and do that, does he?
He says he is gathering a host to him. The tranter looked at his belly, then Odo and Fulk up and down.
Reckon he'll be happier with you two youngsters rather than an old fart like me, don't you?
Emma Sand listened carefully. A man pressed against her, and she felt his hand on her hip. She turned and grabbed his crotch.
Come! You want to fuck me, little man? You need more than a petit cornichon like that.
The fellow's face darkened, and he bunched his fist as if to strike her, but Emma Sand tilted her pale face and stood, arms akimbo.
You'll regret hitting me. I have friends here.
She was not jesting. Already 3 men had moved closer.
Jack, you see this man? He likes my goods but doesn't want to pay.
The fellow spat a curse and stalked away. Emma Sand chuckled.
I think I could let you have a cup or two of wine when you visit us next, Jacques, she said.
He nodded with keen anticipation. Jacques knew her well enough to know that he could expect special favours when he saw her next. Emma Sand rolled her shoulders. She had slept badly and her muscles ached. If possible, she would have remained in her cot until later, but she had been persuaded to listen to the preacher. Frankly, this was wasting her time.
I had hoped to see a more virile figure who would follow a runt like him, she said.
Beside her, young Jeanne tucked a stray blonde curl beneath her coif. Guillemette shrugged. You know what they're like, some of these scrawny types. Look like they'll die at the first spend and then keep rutting all night. Perhaps he's more stamina than you think.
He'd better, for else he'll fall over, Emma Sand said dismissively.
I think he looks quite nice, Jeanne said. She was not yet 22, slim, fair, with a long, heart-shaped face and pale blue eyes. Emma Sand pulled a face.
Him?
He's not as bad as some I've serviced, Guillemette said. She was older than Jeanne, and at the upper limits of her appeal, where her technical skills were beginning to be outweighed by fading looks. She swore she was 28 years old, but Emma Sand knew she had been saying that for 3 years. Emma Sand guessed Guillemette was at least 32, and more likely 2 years older than that. Emma Sand had a good eye for the age of her fillies. A brothel keeper had to. He reminds me of a man I knew once, Jeanne said. Her tone was reflective, and Emma Sand knew that she was thinking of her husband, Edmund. He had been kind to her at first, men often were, but sadly it hadn't lasted. Jeanne still hoped he would revert, but Emma Sand knew his type. It was strange that women with looks as good as hers would often marry brutes who would treat their dogs better. Jeanne had been wedded at 16. To woo her, Edmund had been charm itself. That ended as soon as the priest removed his alb, yet Jeanne did not realise that her husband saw her only as chattel, to be used or sold as he saw fit. She was too trusting. Emma Sand had seen Jeanne in a tavern, taking 2 men outside for a fumbling knee-trembler in the alley behind. Afterwards, she had approached the girl, offering her the protection of a bed in her establishment. As so often, she saw that Jeanne's eye was badly bruised, her lips puffed. "Who did that?" she asked. "My husband," Jeanne said quietly. "Come with me and talk," Emma Sand said. "I can't. If he sees me stop to talk, he'll do more of this," Jeanne said, eyes downcast, a finger touching her eye. "You are truly married?" All too often, a prostitute would partner with a blade who would take the majority of her earnings, offering protection in return. The other side of the coin was, if she stopped working, he might beat her senseless. "Yes, he loves me. But we need money. Is he here now? Point him out to me. It was unnecessary. Edmund, a heavily bearded man, was glaring at Emerson like a judge eyeing a convicted felon. Emerson nodded and looked to Christophe, her guard, making sure he saw the man too. Then, "You have skill in beguiling men. I would have you work for me." Edmund would not allow it. I will offer him more money than he makes now. And it had worked. Edmund declared himself content with his share of the money, while Christophe loomed over him, and in return Emerson made him swear that he would cease beating Jeanne. Glancing at the hermit, Emerson said, "I don't think that bag of piss and bones would keep you occupied more than 5 minutes, and that includes haggling over the price." Guillemette feigned injured pride, bridling as though this was a challenge to her abilities. "I could have him 5 times in an evening if I wanted," she declared. "Would you want?" Emerson said. "I would prefer a stud half his age and double his weight," Guillemette admitted with a giggle. "Hey, shut up! We're trying to listen to the preacher!" a man called. Emerson turned to stare, but her face cleared with recognition. "You tell me to shut up, George? Shall I tell your wife what you asked for last week?" He reddened, while his companions laughed, and Emerson smiled to herself. "I've seen enough." She led the way back to the brothel, proudly thrusting her bosom forward like a knight bearing his shield into battle. Emerson knew her place in the world. Once, like Guillemette and Jeanne, it had been mostly on her back. But now Emerson was a businesswoman. There were few women so independent, and fewer still with her income. She was proud of her status, even if she was looked down upon by the matrons of the town. "What's he saying now?" Emerson asked, as cheering broke out. "That anyone joining will be reborn," Guillemette said. She gave a twisted grin. "Bit late for us, eh, Em?" "Yes," Emerson laughed. Neither woman noticed that Jeanne didn't join in their mirth. Chapter 2. "There!" Bonnet said, returning to his wife and daughter. He was a man of middle height and had a broad smile that made his blue eyes all but disappear in a way that never failed to melt Sybill's heart. She returned his smile as the crowds thinned. The church loomed over them, and she glanced up at it, making the sign of the cross. It was a habit, but today it felt necessary, as though she had a need to ward off evil. The remaining crowd was chanting, fists punching the air as they cried, "Dieu le veut, Dieu le veut, Dieu le veut." At the farther side of the square, women were stitching brown fustian crosses to the left breast of those who had sworn to march to Jerusalem, while clerks accepted gifts to support the pilgrims. Many were happier to pay, she thought, than undertake such a perilous journey.
"Joss," Bonnet said, "take Richelda on ahead."
He waited until their daughter was out of earshot before leading Sybill away from the crush.
"The preacher spoke well. We should think about joining his pilgrimage."
He gave a broad smile and opened his hand. In it lay a fabric cross. A shiver ran down Sybill's spine. "What? You mean to leave us here? How long would it take you to travel all that way? We would not know whether you would ever return. No, husband, please do not do this."
"No! You and Richelda must come too,"
Bonnet said, still smiling.
"The Hermit is gathering a huge army. Not just the scrags and tatters of the villages here, but many thousands. His military advisor is Sir Walter de Boissy-sans-Avoir, and the Pope is telling other knights to join with their feudal hosts, so armies will march from all over Christendom. The hermit says he will lead his own army of the poor and meek, the common folk, who will show the path of righteousness. Imagine an army of men and women dedicated to the support of God and winning back his land. It is the greatest issue of our time. He smiled, his excitement palpable. Benet, how could we afford such... My love, this is the beginning of our future. He laughed. I'll sell the house, and with the money we can buy all we need. If we carry gold, it will be easier to hold about our persons. I will hold it in my scripwife, and then, when we reach Jerusalem, we can settle there and enjoy a new life. A simpler life. How will it be simpler? We shall need money. And we shall make money, my love. Just think. These people think only of the long march, but when they get there, what then? There will be a need for men such as me who can trade and deal, who can sell tools and food, who can help to make the city work. What of Richalda? She's only 7 years old, Benet. What if I die on the journey? Who would look after her then? Woman, you are being deliberately obtuse, Benet said shortly. Obtuse? Sybill stood straighter. Look at me. Would you risk my life? Richalda's life? Benet grimaced. Sybill, why do you never give me credit for having a brain? This will be the greatest opportunity of our lives. We will be the first to settle in a new Christian kingdom here on earth. God himself would look kindly upon all that we did. That is what the preacher was saying, that those who join him will benefit. But he said that he had never been to Jerusalem himself, that he was turned back. So what? It is Jerusalem, woman. Jerusalem, the land where Jesus lived. God will protect us from all danger. You trust God, don't you? She nodded, but all the while she held a picture of her daughter in her mind. Of course. Then we must prepare. I shall sell the shop, you must procure the basics for the journey, and we shall depart as soon as all is ready. Yes, husband, don't worry. At the sight of our host, all the heathens will flee, he said. They won't dare confront the army of God. He grinned broadly and then punched the air. Dieu lève! Dieu lève! The people cried. To Sybill, their calls sounded like the giggling and jeering of demons. Cerisier. Giddy, the tranter, clattered up the stony track to his home. This was a good land. He had hoped to raise children here, but all he hoped for now was wine to help him forget. He shut Aimé, his donkey, in the stable and made his way to his house, pouring a cup of wine and staring at his bed. It was broad, made by his own hands. They had conceived their child in that bed. She had gone into labour in that bed, and, after the pain and fevers, she had succumbed and died in it. A neighbour had offered to buy the bed, but he couldn't sell it. He detested the thought of someone else using it. Although he was not a spiritual man, he sensed that keeping the bed meant his amike remained by his side. Nothing else in this house held him. Giddy felt that it was like him, loveless, chill, and closed up. He rarely spoke to others, unless to dicker over the cost of transporting goods to market. There was no one he considered a friend, and, since Amike's death, he had had no lover. Watching her die, mopping her blood, had killed all lust in him. If he were to die tomorrow, who would hold up the scales to his life and pronounce it good or bad? God and all his angels might consider that he hadn't been a terribly bad man, but who would speak for him? Would anyone?
Giddy stared about him again, and his eyes fell on the cross over the bed. For some, it was the sign of hope and salvation. For him, it was a reminder of God's punishment. The words of the preacher came back to him. What if he too could be forgiven? Sens.
What is it, Jeanne? Emerson asked.
Jeanne had dragged as they left the square. Guillemette was a short distance ahead, seemingly alone with her thoughts. It left Jeanne and her mistress alone.
Edmund says I'm lazy, because my money is going to you. He wants to sell me to his friends in the tavern.
He swore you would work with me, and only me, Emerson said, her voice cold. Jeanne shivered. When Edmund confronted her, it was like the old days. He was drunk and wanted her to go straight to the tavern to his friends. She had fled, terrified, and just hoped he would be asleep when she returned.
Jeanne, you cannot work for me if he injures you,
Emerson said. Jeanne was struck with a sudden fear. Emerson was smiling, but there was firm conviction in her eyes.
I need my sluts willing and eager to service the men. If you turn up beaten, men won't want you.
What can I do?
Stay with us. I'll have Christophe look after you, and when you go out, take him with you.
Edmund will be angry.
Edmund will be drunk, Emerson said firmly. I will not have you shared among a group of sweaty bar drinkers one step from the gallows. We both know his friends are brutes, not like the customers I bring.
Yes.
So you must stay in the brothel where we can protect you. If you want, I can send Christophe to gather your things.
Would you look after me?
Emerson's voice could have greased the city's gates.
Child, you are one of my girls. You think I would desert you?
Thank you, Emerson, Jeanne said, with tears springing afresh. Her mistress smiled like a matron chiding a foolish child, but there was a hard glitter in her eyes that Jeanne did not see as she wiped away her tears. Thursday, the 27th of March. 3 days later, Fulk ducked under the tavern's lintel and peered about the smoky chamber, his trepidation mingled with... what? Excitement, certainly, but fearful anticipation too. He had a mild hope that his brother would deter him. Surely Odo would make him see how ridiculous it was, yet he believed that he was right. Peter the Hermit had shown him his destiny. Odo was sitting at the far wall, and Fulk pushed through the crowds. Seeing a maid dispensing drinks, he asked for a large cup of mulled cider. He snuffed his drink, and his mouth watered at the spices and honey. With a broad grin on his face, he crossed the room, trying to sneak to Odo's side unobserved, but Odo turned at the last moment.
You're late.
God save you, brother. I hope I find you well.
God give you a good day,
Odo responded. Fulk shrugged and grinned. He has. I've extra work, and I'm promised more money if I complete it on time.
No wonder you look smug,
Odo said. Fulk's master was notoriously tight-fisted. How did you manage that? Your smith would rather have his teeth pulled than pay an extra denier.
I'm worth every sou, Fulk said.
Perhaps. If you are to be believed, he does no work himself, Odo said. Fulk joined his brother on the bench. The kingdom is in turmoil. Everyone wants to join the Hermit's pilgrimage. Many are demanding weapons, so I've spoken to another smith. He'll pay handsomely for arrowheads, swords, and long knives. The hermit could not have come at a better time. I'm glad for you. You know, Odo, Fulk said, leaning forward, we could do worse than join them. Us? Fulk's smile remained, but he licked his lips nervously. This was the moment he had dreaded. You're pious. You'd like to see the Holy Land, wouldn't you? And what then? Walk to Jerusalem and return 2 years hence with no job, no prospects, nothing? You'd return as a man of honour, with all your sins forgiven. All the town's bakers would want you to go and help them. It would enhance your prospects if you join a grand pilgrimage to the Holy Land. What of you? With my skills, I'll be in demand wherever I go. But if I were to see the holy city, well, I might even settle and raise a family. If God has made the land, it must be beautiful. You think you'd be welcome? Every town needs a smith, brother, just as they need men who can bake bread. I suppose that's true. You're religious, Fulk said, his voice wheedling. It must make sense to help free the city from the heathens. Of course it does, but... Odo flung up his hands. I have responsibilities. My master would be lost without me. The church needs the bread we make for the religious and the peasants who depend on their alms. Would you have me desert them? You think it'll grow easier? Fulk said. He sat back and took a gulp of his cider. You think there'll be a better time? Didn't you hear the hermit? The Emperor of Byzantium has called on all Christians to help liberate Jerusalem. If you wait a year, Byzantium might be overrun. And my neighbour's hog will sprout wings and fly. You can scoff, brother, Fulk said. He set his cup on the floor and spread his hands imploringly. But think, what if this is the end? The one remaining time you could make a difference. Think of explaining to the angels how you wanted to save Jerusalem, but you had another custard tart to make. That you would have gone, but the baker needed another dozen loaves. That you would have gone, but you had to clean the ovens. How would the angels reply? They would say, you failed us. You failed Christ and God to make another pie, to make another dozen loaves, to clean the shop. You allowed Jerusalem to fall for petty reasons. I cannot be blamed for the city's fall. The heathens captured it hundreds of years ago. The centre of Christian teaching, the city where Christ lived and died. All that's needed is a few men to take up arms and recover it, Fulk said. After marching 1,000 miles and wresting it from the Saracens. Oh, yes, the angels will understand that. It's a long way. Odo eyed him suspiciously. Why are you so keen? You're always happy if you have enough money for a pot of wine and a wench. Suddenly you're all fired up with the thought of marching to Jerusalem. Why? An edge scraped at his tone. Is it a woman? That's not worthy of you, Fulk said. He leaned forward, elbow on his knee, staring at his brother. Odo, what'll we become, eh? One day I'll become a smith when I'm tired of the drunken arse who demands ever more efforts to keep him in his cups. You'll end up a baker, perhaps, and work for the church. We may sire children like petty barons. What else? What else do you want? I want excitement. I want to see the world, to do things. You can do things here. Odo mimicked cruelly. No! All I can do here is work, drink, and work again. Nothing more. I want to make memories so that when I'm old, I don't just remember an endless succession of years, each as dull as the one before. I want memories that will make me smile and reflect. Think, Odo, to march and win Jerusalem. That would be a thing to light fires of joy in the belly, wouldn't it? Do you have any idea how troublesome that journey will be? You'll need money, travelling clothes, a waxed cloak, a spare shirt, lots of things you haven't considered. I'm a poor fellow when it comes to planning, it's true. I remember last summer, when you planned to meet one maid, forgetting you'd already agreed to meet another at the same place. Fulk winced. The event was painful to recall. Aye, well, that was embarrassing, but that time your master left you in charge for a day, and you drank all his wine, and he found you hog-drunk in the... I confess, that was a mistake. Mistake? It almost cost you your apprenticeship. Well, even apprentices have their foibles. Yet you believe you'd be safe on a grand itter to Jerusalem? At least you'd never have to endure a young fool of an apprentice or old age. Otto shook his head grimly and finished his cider. Buy more drink. Why? If you're so sure I'm moon-mazed, why do you want to drink with me? You are a fool, I doubt that little enough. But if you're determined to go, no brother could let you go alone. The Grand Itter will set off on the second Monday after Easter. That gives me time to settle my affairs. Knowing you'd head in the wrong direction entirely. Brother! I knew you would, Fulk declared joyfully, grabbing his brother's face and kissing him. Otto could not pull away fast enough. He mustered an expression of disapproval and disgust, but could not efface the grin teasing at his lips. Thursday, the 3rd of April. Jeanne pressed the door's latch nervously. It gave a loud click. She warily pushed the door, peering into the room beyond. The doorway gaped like Hell's Gateway, and she shivered involuntarily. She had not brought Christoph. He had been busy removing a drunk, and she didn't want to wait in case her courage dissipated. Instead, she came alone. She regretted that now. Standing on the threshold, she felt terribly vulnerable. She entered and was about to cross the room when a stool scraped on the floor's packed earth. "Thought you'd find me gone, you bitch, didn't you?" he said as his fist swung. Edmund's blow glanced off her jaw and she felt her teeth crash together. Blood filled her mouth while lights flashed and sparked, and she fell to the floor like a corpse. She had no sensation in her legs or arms, only an all-consuming pain at her mouth and skull that enveloped her head. "You've been at the brothel for days, bitch! You want to leave me, wife? Is that it?" She saw his boots, saw one draw back, but couldn't speak to plead. She tried to retreat, but his kick caught her right breast. She gave a harsh grunt from deep in her throat. The agony was so intense, she was reduced to hacking sobs while tears flooded her eyes. She was aware of him beside her and smelled his breath, sweet and sickly, like the wine he had been drinking. And then she saw the knife gleaming in the dark and she whimpered. She tried to push herself away, but he caught her tunic at the neckline and pulled her towards him. "If you try to escape me," he said, resting the blade on her nose, "I'll mark you. I'll cut off your nose, your ears, your lips, and no man will look at you, let alone pay for you, slut. You're lucky I keep you in my house. From now on, whore, you do as I say. You owe me, bitch." He thrust her, and when her head hit the wall, mercifully, she lost consciousness. But not for long enough. When she woke, her nightmare really began. Chapter 3. South Taunton, England. Roger de Tony rode at the head of 7 horsemen, his father at his side, and stared at the peasants labouring in the fields. A man in his early 20s, he was still new to this land. His hair was dark brown, his eyes the same pale grey as his mother's, and he was built like any warrior who had trained with sword, shield and knife since the age of 6. His shoulders were broad and strong, his belly narrow, his right arm powerful, as befitted a knight and son of a knight, and he rode like the messenger of death and war that he was.
"Look at them! They hate us,"
his father said. Roger shrugged. 1 or 2 villains dared to meet his gaze, but for the most part men, women and children looked away. Cowed and pathetic, they were inconsequential.
"What of it?"
"Be aware. These people were beaten less than a generation ago. It would take little for them to rise up again."
"And be cut down. They are cattle to be herded."
"Have you never seen an angry bull?"
Sir Radolf spoke sharply.
"These fools may be ignorant, but there are many of them. If they rose up, they could kill us all."
"What of you, father? Do you hate them in your turn?"
"It would be like hating the sheep in my flocks or the cattle in my herds. They are not worth hatred."
"No," Roger agreed. He did not hate the people here either. He despised them. They were weak, pathetic. Since the glorious campaigns of King William, they were destroyed and only of use as workers.
"You dislike this land, don't you?"
his father said. "There's nothing to like," Roger said. "Look at it. It rains every day. There is little sun or warmth, such as we knew at home in Normandy."
"Your brother will take Conchon-Ouche," Radolf said. "The castle there is the centre of our family's authority, but, given time, this little collection of hamlets will become equally valuable. The land is fertile. You have good woodland and you have power."
"This is a borderland. The men of Cornwall seek to foment trouble at all times. We'll have to fight them constantly," Roger said.
"Then do so. Show them the iron fist,"
Radolf said. He turned to his son.
"This land was taken by me, and I will not cede it. If the people must be beaten to accept my rule, so be it. Control them as you would a rash. A hunting dog is not subdued by kindness. It learns obedience by club and whip. These people are no different."
"I'd prefer to remain in Conche," Roger said. "This cold, miserable land is draining. I don't want to be stuck here like a hazel twig planted in this damp soil."
"What would you do then?"
They had reached the wooden fort that was their home. In defence against outlaws and brigands, the gates were routinely kept locked. A loud bellow soon had men scrabbling to unbar the gates, and with a graunching of iron they were opened. Sir Radolf led the way into the castle's court, the donjon on its hill before them. To Roger's surprise, the local priest was waiting for them.
"There is urgent news, my lord,"
he said to Sir Radolf. While his father gruffly welcomed their guest, Roger de Tony jerked his head to the steward for a cup of wine, almost draining it as the steward took a second to his father. It was rude to drain his own first, but Roger was thirsty and out of sorts. This wooden hall was cold, and although the peasants had filled the gaps in the walls with daub, still the wind howled through. The flames in the middle of the floor moved, the smoke gusting and dancing with every breeze outside. What he wouldn't do to escape this foul, chill island. When he was in possession of this fortress, he would build a stone castle, not to protect from enemies, but from the wind. These walls offered as much protection from gales as a mail's shirt. The priest was an elderly man and spoke haltingly in the presence of his Norman overlord. Radolf's short temper and violence were well known.
"Your cousin Stephen, my lord, asks you to join him.
What?
Radolf stared frowningly. Join him? Why?
The Pope has declared a great expedition to the Holy Land to liberate Christians from the cruel Saracen oppressors. Your cousin will join the Pope's forces. He asks you to bring your feudal host to help recover Jerusalem and bring the city back into the light of God's grace.
The knight drained his cup and held it out to be refilled.
Read it.
The priest began from the top with the lengthy, polite salutation, but Radolf grumpily gesticulated with a hand, waving it around and around until the priest skimmed the rest and got to the meat of the message.
This, he says, he gathers a host under his banner. He will leave at Easter and proposes to meet with you and others at Rome. From there, he will take ship and make his way to Constantinople, and thence pass into Anatolia, and by stages march to the Holy Land, as the good Pope has asked.
To the Holy Land?
Radolf walked to his great seat on the dais and dropped into it. He cast an eye about the whitewashed walls of his hall, at the tapestry of which he was so proud, and which was succumbing to the weather, at the plates and cups on his sideboard.
It is many leagues to Rome,
he said pensively.
I knew a man once who took up the pilgrim's garb and said he reached Rome, but that it was still further to the Holy Land. He never made it.
Father, let's go. This will give me the opportunity to do God's work. It's the perfect opportunity. Let's go and recapture the Holy Land. Radolf smiled at him.
Roger, you have little understanding of the distances involved, and still less of joining in a host such as this. It is a hazardous thing to travel so far. Better if
this is God's work,
Roger said.
And holding our lands here is our work,
Radolf snapped.
If I go off seeking Saracens to slay, there may be no castle here on my return. Do you want to have to win back our lands from the peasants just because we took time to venture to the Holy Land?
If you won't, at least allow me. Let me take a small force, perhaps 10 men at arms, and I will win renown for you. I swear I will come back with glory.
Radolf eyed him doubtfully, then threw a look at the priest.
What do you say, priest? Should my son go? Do you think him old enough to command?
I've known your son only a brief time, my lord, the priest said carefully. He is a most competent knight, I am sure, but does he have the skill to weld men to his ambitions? A commander who cannot command is a poor thing in battle.
You say? Aye. I dare say you were a priest with the men who stood against King William when he stormed the beaches. Well, this is a simple cause. There's only one purpose, the glory of God, and by the cross of my sword, I am sure that he will acquit himself bravely. Perhaps you should go with him, if you think he would benefit from your counsel.
Me?
The old man looked shocked.
I jest, old man. You would scarcely make it to the coast, let alone across the channel. But if my son must go, he'll need to have good counsel even to reach Rome. I will send a good man with you, Roger, a man who has skill and knowledge, someone who can guard and guide you, for you are too hot-headed on occasion, and fret when you don't get your own way. This journey will cure you of that, I hope. But before you leave, you will be knighted. I will not have a son of mine depart for Jerusalem without being given his rank.
Roger bowed to his father. There was a thrilling in his blood. He would be knighted. A warrior in his own right at last. And away from this tedious, wet landscape, off to find excitement and adventure. His father eyed him sourly.
You will return here with a fresh outlook on the world, and perhaps the size of your position in it.
Sens, Friday the 4th of April. Guillemette pulled her chemise down as her latest client left her room. Last evening she had been busy until the early hours and remained in her bed until the first client arrived at almost noon. Now it was time for food, her belly told her. She filled a cup from the jug of wine she kept handy. Some days the wine kept her sane. Some of the older men stank like ferrets, with hands as rough as unsmoothed floorboards, and were enough to drive a woman to wine. She was considering a second cup when the door opened and Jeanne entered.
Hello, Jeanne. God's mercy.
What happened? Jeanne walked in unsteadily. Her face was bruised and scratched. There were tooth marks on her throat, and she shook like a fine birch in a gale. Jeanne, sit down, Guillemette said, pushing aside the dirtier sheets and putting her arm about the slim shoulders. What happened? Were you attacked?
My husband did this. He beat me and kicked me when I was on the floor, and he made me lie with his friends. He shared me with them like a barrel of ale,
Jeanne said. Her voice was low and calm, even as her body shuddered. He sold you to them, Guillemette said coldly.
I went home to fetch some clothes, but he was waiting and he did this.
Guillemette felt her chest constrict with rage. It was almost difficult to breathe. She was so angry. Wait here, she said. She was soon back with Emerson and Christophe. Look at her, Guillemette said, flinging a hand at Jeanne. See what he's done to her?
What happened, Jeanne?
Jeanne, her eyes downcast, spoke haltingly about her return home.
They all took me, she said. Edmund took their money and left me there.
He swore to me that he would not misuse you, Emerson said.
I'm surprised you ignored my advice. I said you should stay here. Guillemette, listening while she tried to calm Jeanne, heard a new note in her voice. She peered up at the madam.
I had to fetch a fresh chemise, and
Jeanne whispered. Emerson shook her head with finality. There was no cruelty in her face, only a cool disinterest, like a woman deciding not to buy when a vendor would not drop his price to accommodate her. Well, I cannot use you like this. Come back when your injuries are healed.
Wait, Guillemette said. Surely you can't mean to desert her? Emerson, she needs a place where she will be safe.
I'm not here to protect women with bad husbands, Emerson said with finality. If her husband did this to her, she's no use to me. If he wants to make money from her without my help, it will be an expensive mistake on his part.
You won't help her.
Don't be foolish, Guillemette, Emerson said. Now get back to work. There must be a desperate man out there somewhere. Go and find him. Christophe, send her home. She withdrew from the room, humming a tune, and, as if for the first time, Guillemette saw her as she really was. Although she could put on a kindly act when it suited her, she was yet a businesswoman. Her interest lay only in how much money she could win from her clients, and that meant the value of her stable of women. Guillemette stopped Christophe. Jeanne looked as though she could not fully comprehend Emerson's dismissal. She was stunned and barely aware even when Guillemette took her hands in her own. Jeanne, did you fetch your things from your house? No. Is there anything you need there? Really need? No. Guillemette, I don't want to go back there. I won't live with him again.
You won't, Jeanne,
Guillemette promised.
You'll never go back.
Book 2. Pilgrimage. Chapter 4. Guillemette hefted her pack. Emerson's casual dismissal of Jeanne at the time Jeanne needed her help most had shocked Guillemette. It was the job of the madam of the house to protect her girls. You didn't have to come with me, Jeanne said. It wasn't only for you. If she could throw you back to Edmund, I can't trust her. Jeanne sobbed quietly, and Guillemette put an arm over her shoulder. Come now, we'll find another brothel. With my skills and your looks, she added, casting a doubtful look at Jeanne's battered face. We'll soon find work. The roadway was hard on Guillemette's feet. The soles of her shoes were designed for walking about town rather than heavy work. Jeanne was quiet, and Guillemette continued prattling, partly to keep her friend's spirits up, but also to buoy her own. For all her cheerful comments, she knew most brothels were tough, difficult environments. Finding a place run by an accommodating madam was not easy. Still, she had heard of a place in Troyes, 2 days' walk to the east, and she hoped that she and Jeanne would be secure there. Jeanne sniffled. I couldn't go back to him. She was limping, and not only from the rapes. Guillemette wondered whether Jeanne's injuries were worse than she let on. You won't. We'll find another home, don't worry. They had encountered few men and women so far, but now a thick straggle of people overtook them. At their head was a preacher who strode purposefully as a bailiff seeking a peasant's tax. He peered at them, noting their dress and comportment.
Are you joining with us?
Guillemette glanced at the people following him. Where are you going?
Have you not heard? Peter the Hermit has spoken. We go to Jerusalem to liberate the people.
He peered.
Your friend. Has she been attacked?
Yes.
A brigand or
her husband? He beat her like a dog, and then did the worst thing a man could do to his wife. He sold her to his friends. They took their sport with her. The preacher gasped, visibly shocked. He shook his head and made the sign of the cross.
That is a disgrace. The man should be punished.
Guillemette was glad to see how the priest was affected. His anger was palpable.
Your husband should be made to realize his failings. Where is he?
The priest gazed about, as if seeking Edmund among the trees nearby. He's at their home, Guillemette said.
You have left him?
Yes, I have left him, Jeanne cried. And there was a fractured note in her voice, as though her very sanity was threatened. Guillemette heard it and put her arm about her.
You are welcome to join us for as long as you wish, my children, even so far as Jerusalem itself.
The holy city, Jeanne said. God would not want women like us there.
He would welcome you,
the priest said and smiled.
We are all sinners, child. But in Jerusalem, your offences will be washed away. Your souls will be cleansed like newborn babes. We are a part of God's army, marching under the banner of Peter the Hermit, God bless him.
God wouldn't want me, Jeanne said sadly. Cerisier, Saturday the 5th of April. Giddy pulled the reins. Ame gazed back disinterestedly. Giddy considered beating the recalcitrant beast, but he knew that Ame would only grow more stubborn. He should be home by now, sitting with a cup of ale. Instead, here he was on a grassy roadway a clear 1.5 miles from home. He stared resentfully at the beast.
Well, Ame, what now? Wait here until the day of judgment?
Ame shook her head free of flies and began cropping the verge. Giddy gave a tch of disgust.
I'll sell you to the tanners, you old devil,
he muttered. He was still there when a man appeared in the distance, a party of men and women following. The man in front walked barefoot, with the melancholy demeanour that marked him as religious. Seeing Giddy, he smiled. "Are you well, my friend?"
I would be happier if this brute would move.
The preacher looked at Ame and patted her head. For a moment, Giddy expected her to bite his hand, but then she lowered her head for him to scratch behind her ears.
"She's a handsome animal. We have need of such as her. And you."
Who are you?
Giddy said, but he had guessed.
"Pilgrims. We go to free Jerusalem,"
the preacher said, and launched into a well-rehearsed peroration about the benefits of the pilgrimage.
Jerusalem?
Giddy said scornfully.
I can't walk that far.
"God will give you strength. It is his desire that we should free our brothers and sisters in Christ."
He wouldn't want me,
Giddy said, shaking his head. The preacher could argue all he wanted, but he would not want Giddy if he learned of his offences. They were sins. He knew that, although he did not regret them. The preacher sighed and made the sign of the cross over him before continuing along the road. Ame began to follow the pilgrims.
"You see, my friend,"
the preacher called with delight.
"God has shown you he wants you and your beast to join us."
Ame won't walk all that way,
Giddy said.
but I'm glad your path goes with ours for a way.
But when they reached the parting of their ways, Ame refused to go homewards, instead following the preacher. Seeing Giddy's distress, the preacher called a general halt and walked back to Giddy.
"My friend, you are disconsolate. Tell me, have you a wife who will miss you?"
No, but
You said God would not want you to go to Jerusalem. Tell me, why do you think that?
Giddy looked down.
I'm unfit.
How so?
Giddy would not answer, and after a moment the preacher nodded understandingly.
"It is your secret to keep, my friend. I will listen if you wish to tell me. But for now, know that any sin, any crime, can be forgiven. All you need to do is join us in faith. God promises you eternal life, the remission of all sins, if you do this one thing for him."
Giddy looked at him. The certainty in his voice rang firm and true, like the honest truth of a cathedral bell. Perhaps the man was right. Giddy had nothing to hold him here now. Perhaps. He made a decision.
I will come.
Troyes, Monday the 7th of April. "Do you think he's right?" Jeanne said. Before them, the dark smudge of a city's smoke appeared in the sky. It was all Guillemette cared about. A city held the promise of wine, a river to soak her feet, a fire before which to rest her aches and pains. On their way, they accumulated more people. It was like droplets of water on a dish. First there were tiny ones, but these touched others and grew until there was a smaller number of large drops, and these accreted to create a single pool. Men and women came to meet them. As they passed villages, the preacher would speak and people joined them. At fields, workers dropped their tools to become part of the growing column. Guillemette found her senses dulled. She moved with a roll of her hips like an ancient peasant, eyes fixed on the next bend in the road. It would be only a few paces to that corner, she thought, and then there would be a straight section to the next corner. And then another. Jeanne began speaking. Perhaps Edmund was right to tell me to go back. He was so loving to me in the beginning. Guillemette had heard it all before. Jeanne had told her that her husband had been a kind, generous man until they needed money, and he suggested she might offer herself to others. At first, Jeanne thought he was joking, but then he extended his persuasion with fists and boots. There was nothing humorous in his proposal. It was the old story. Guillemette had heard it before from other women trapped in marriages with men more keen on ensuring the steady flow of wine than the well-being of their wives. All too many had told the same story. It reminded Guillemette how lucky she was. She had been married once and would never submit to a man again. Paul had been a shit. Edmund was unkind, but Paul had enjoyed hitting, making Guillemette weep. Whenever he was drunk, it happened. So one day, Guillemette took a knife, and now Paul would never hit another woman, and Guillemette was free. I shouldn't be here, Jeanne mumbled. I should be with Edmund. This was the first stage. Guillemette had seen enough women in the brothel to recognise the signs. Don't. Don't what? Guillemette pulled her from the column of pilgrims and put her hands on Jeanne's shoulders. You can't go back, Jeanne. You're miserable and scared, but if you go back, he'll beat you and put you on the streets again, and he'll sell you to his friends again, and he'll keep you for as long as you win him money, but as soon as you're too old, or too scarred from his beatings, or too dull-witted, he'll beat you one last time, and that time you won't get up again. But I don't know where I'll go, Jeanne whispered. Nor do I. But wherever we go, it's better than going back. I know what it's like. Everything ahead is scary, whereas if you turn around and return to him, at least you'll know what you're in for. But if you go back, you'll get the biggest beating of your life. He may kill you if he's drunk. I know the road ahead looks terrifying, but the road behind you is worse. What will become of me? I'll look after you, Guillemette said. I swear it. They were still there when Giddy passed by. The tranter hesitated and then drew the reluctant Ame to them.
Ladies, you look exhausted, he said. Please ride my donkey. At least one at a time can be rested. Ame is not the most comfortable beast, but she's better than wearing out your feet.
Giddy was not a young man, but the smile Guillemette gave him made him feel 20 again. He knew he would remember that smile all the rest of his days. East of Sens. Fulk strode along with a bag, a rolled-up blanket over his shoulder, and a long staff in his hand. He whistled, ignoring Odo's grumbles that the sound was enough to make a man beg for a knife to end his sorrows. Odo's own belongings were in a small sack bound to a stick dangling over his shoulder. The two continued jauntily, with many a comment about the other's odour and appearance, as brothers will. They were not alone. Departing Sens that day were many men as well as women and children, for not all had deserted their families. There were tears and wails as the cavalcade set off, women standing and waving, others clinging to their menfolk and crying piteously. Fulk saw one man take leave of his wife while she desperately exhorted him to stay. Her mother was with her, hands on her shoulders, and 3 children clutched her skirts as he strode away. Excited and eager, he looked like a youth on his first hunt. His wife looked as though she knew she would never see him again. If he were to return, there was no knowing how long it would be before he could put his feet up before his fire again. To travel to a faraway land often meant death, and the womenfolk knew it. In the meantime, they would have to work every hour to feed their children. Fulk glanced about them. There are not many warriors. Otto gave an emphatic shrug.
What of it? These people are strong in their belief. With faith and God's grace, we will crush any foe that dares stand before us.
Well, the Saracens are said to be mighty warriors, Fulk said.
So now you're fearful of battle?
Otto laughed.
Brother, you are inconsistent at the best of times. Be bold, be courageous. Believe in yourself and these others. This is a great pilgrimage. With so many, how can we fail?
Brother, I see too few fighting men. I grant that the Hermit's a good orator, but there's not one knight or man-at-arms here. How many bear swords?
The Lord will provide all we need.
I believe he will, but he'd not object to our saving him the effort. At the next city, we'll buy ourselves swords.
What? And carry them all the way to the Holy Land?
Otto, if we reach Constantinople without weapons, we'll have to buy them at the same time as all these other pilgrims. We'll either have to buy the most expensive cutlery in Christendom or do without. Besides, I would rather have a weapon for defence during our march than have no means to protect ourselves.
I suppose that does make sense,
Otto admitted reluctantly.
Look,
a good armourer I have heard lives in Estisac. It's not more than a day's walk from Sens.
Why didn't you think of this before?
Otto grumbled.
We could have got some good steel from Sens before we left, rather than coming all this way and visiting a smith from the wilds who probably has little better idea of making a blade than I do.
I am the apprentice